We got to do it now. Can't afford not to. And now he's after this cap and trade. Joining us is our friend, our great friend of this show, ranking member of the Senate Committee on Environment and Public Works from the great state of Oklahoma, Senator James Inhofe. Hey, Senator, how are you?
Hey, good to be back with you, Steve.
Well, it's good to be back with you on a day before we get to what happened in the Senate today. I mean, even the left, and we're going to play some of these bites later, like Matthews and Olbermann, ripped this president apart.
That was just beautiful. I was expecting to have the reaction that I had, but to see MSNBC with the same reaction and Rachel Maddow, it's really kind of fun to watch the bind that they're in. First of all, cap and trade is dead. I said that last time I was on your station, and it's not just dead; it's buried. And so it's funny. He never used the words cap and trade.
No, a carbon tax. No, not at all.
And he didn't do it because, obviously it's not going to work and it is dead. But that infuriated the far left because they said, look, we got the White House, we have a majority in the House and the Senate. Why can't you get something done? Just no leadership. So you have both extremes talking about the fact that there is no leadership in the White House. And they're both right.
They're absolutely right. There's so much to talk about. So cap and trade, but he's going to next week. He's going to talk to Republican leaders and Democratic leaders. What do you think he's aiming for? Do you think he's aiming for something less?
Here. Let me tell you what's going to happen,
yeah.
Steve. First of all, what he did say. Now, I don't think it was in the speech, but he said on the week of the 19th. That's when we get back from the 4th of July. That he is going to have them pass some kind of an energy bill, and it doesn't matter what it is. Because he's going to take that, put it in conference with the Waxman-Markey bill. Now, he'll leave it in conference till after the November elections. Then he'll have all 10 of the Democrats that we're going to defeat.
The lame ducks, yeah.
The lame ducks will be there to vote for him. Now, he hasn't counted very well because he still can't get there with that number. But can you imagine? And I hope all your guys, I know you have a sophisticated audience, but you got to keep in mind what he's talking about doing is deliberately forcing these people to come back afterwards after they've lost the election and it's all over to try to pass something they were not able to pass otherwise.
And the reason they wouldn't vote for it before they are up for election, these 10 senators, these 10 Democrats, is because that would lose them the election.
But look what they did.
So he's waiting until after the election. Even if they lose, they're lame duck. They're getting out in 2 months, and then he'd have them come back and usurp the will of the American people.
Well, that's exactly right. Let's remember also that when, it's been 8 years ago since we coined the phrase, the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on the American people. And back then it was pretty lonely. Since that time, people have caught on. They know the cost of this thing. Cap and trade is cap and trade. And let me I'm sure you're aware of it. You may not have been talking to your listeners, though. They did an EPA analysis, economic analysis of the Kerry-Lieberman bill yesterday before the Oval Office speech. And when they did, they said it's only going to cost, it came out to about $150 a year or something like that. Now, the problem with that is they don't consider the labor part of it. They don't consider jobs. When you throw jobs in there, as the EPA, by their own admission, this would be the same thing as Waxman-Markey in terms of the cost.
Right, the biggest tax increase in American history.
That's right. The greatest tax increase in the history of America, and it wouldn't be more than 1% off. So since the range of that particular bill was the cost was between $300 and $400 billion a year, so that means that's what this would cost, and yet they're going to try to say that it's going to be something like 10% of that.
All right, so we have cap and trade dead in the Senate. Even Byron Dorgan said today the votes aren't there. We had yesterday, and congratulations on this, by a vote of 61, actually 61 to 35.
You paid attention to that? No one else did.
Oh yeah, you guys in the Senate, the U.S. Senate beat the Sanders amendment, and that was that it would have imposed a multi-billion-dollar tax increase on most of America's domestic energy.
Well,
producers.
Let me characterize it a little bit different,
yeah.
Steve. I'm coming from an oil state, and most of ours is marginal production. That's 15 barrels or less a day. When we found out that he had the bill that, through the tax code, would absolutely destroy all exploration and production in America, all of it. Nobody knew about this. This came up. I heard it on the floor, and I objected to it, so they couldn't get by, so they forced him into a 60-vote margin. Then we split up the time and debated. it. So you had me. I'm ranked as the most conservative member of the United States Senate by the National Journal. Bernie Sanders is ranked as the most liberal. You know,
Yeah.
he's a self-proclaimed socialist.
Yeah.
So you had the two of us that were arguing with each other and debating back and forth, and we each one reserved the balance of our time till we heard the other one. Then we refuted that. He was trying to say Exxon doesn't pay any taxes, and then he was also trying to say it wouldn't affect the small producers. This is a figure that you may not be aware of. But if you take the marginal production, that's the wells under 15 barrels, the average producing marginal well, and most of those are in Oklahoma, is 2 barrels a day. That's all, 2 barrels a day. But we constitute 28% of the domestic production outside of Alaska. And so it's very, very significant. He would have killed those people. And they have literally millions of royalty owners that would have been out, too. Well, we beat them like a drum, and you're right, 61 to 35.
Now, before we get to the vote today, which was very good, it was not oil, not energy related, but I want to let you weigh in on a couple of things that this man said yesterday. Let's play that edited version. Listen to what he said closing his speech yesterday.
Our determination to fight for the America we want for our children. Even if we're unsure exactly what that looks like, even if we don't yet precisely know how we're going to get there, we know we'll get there.
What the hell is he talking about?
I have no idea. I heard that, and I thought, well, what he wants for his children and what I want for my children, let me assure you, it's not the same thing.
But, my God, this is the leader, saying, we don't know where we're going, we don't know how we'll get there, but don't worry, we'll get there. What?
And this is an Oval Office speech to make it worse. His first one.
All right, now he said something at the beginning of the speech. Listen to cut number 1.
As a result of these efforts, we've directed BP to mobilize additional equipment and technology. And in the coming weeks and days, these efforts should capture up to 90% of the oil leaking out of the well. This is until the company finishes drilling a relief well later in the summer that's expected to stop the leak completely.
To me, this is the headline. Obama says in a couple of weeks, 90% of the leak will be captured, and in a couple of months, the leak is capped. I never heard that before.
Well, there isn't. He probably hasn't either. I think, though, Steve, the problem he has is not with himself so much. He relies totally on his advisors. Now, his advisor, you're talking about John Podesta and his center, the very liberal group.
Center for American Progress that have been running the response to the BP spill.
Yeah, and that's what he's doing.
But have you heard this, Senator, that in a couple of weeks they're going to be 90% of it is going to be contained? I haven't heard that.
No, and it's just out of the blue. It's
unbelievable.
And there's nothing that he has that is going to document what he says. But I think each time he makes a speech, you got to keep in mind this guy's never lost anything. Here's a guy that came from he's never had a job in the real world, and he's been a community organizer. He's always had yes people around him. He's very gifted and persuasive, and he's president of the United States. And he is one of the differences I see between now and 1994 was when Bill Clinton had gone through his first 2 years, he at least had the political savvy to know that if the public are so opposed that they knew he was going to lose, then he all of a sudden started shifting around. You don't see that in Obama.
No.
He really believes he is so gifted he can turn these people around.
And the people that have propped him up have taught him how to be a socialist and a Marxist, the Saul Alinsky's of the world, and his father, who is a Marxist in Kenya. This man is going to change America, even if it means he's out in 4 years, and dare us to change it back. But let's, before we let you go, we're talking to Senator James Inhofe of the great state of Oklahoma on the Steve Malzberg Show. A measure was defeated today. It would have been it would have given more money to more stimulus, more money, more to fund teachers and everybody else, and unemployment insurance, and you name it. And it went down 52 to 45. They needed 60 votes.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about that.
Well, what they're talking about on all the stimulus thing, let's go back because you have to put it in the proper context. The $787 billion stimulus bill, when it was passed, didn't stimulate. And you might remember that I had amendments to try to at least put that money into road building, something that we would be able to do in America that would stimulate. And, of course, we lost those. So that was all social engineering. I have to say this also, that prior to that was the $700 billion bailout, and many Republicans bit the dust on that, and I still can't figure out why, how they're able to persuade them to do that. So we fast forward now to the president present time, we still have what he is calling stimulant, but the stuff that he has isn't going to stimulate anything. The critical thing about the vote that took place today is the wake-up call, the realization that a lot of these members know that their jobs are on the line. See, it's not just Blanche Lambert, but we could name...
You mean Blanche Lincoln? Yeah, it was six Democratic senators voted with all the Republicans.
Yeah, her name was Lambert, by the way.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm thinking about Blanche. Yeah, right.
I was thinking it's Blanche Lambert Lincoln.
Right, yes.
But the others say, do we still want... There's no saying in politics, Steve, that you've heard many times, and that is when the ship sinks, the rats jump off.
Yeah.
They're jumping off.
The rats are jumping. Hey, Senator, always a pleasure. Keep the fight, and you're welcome here anytime, sir.
Thanks so much.
Take care. Senator James Inhofe, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to have more on this.